Ever get that feeling, like your past relationships are somehow like influencing your current
Oh,
ones?
absolutely. It's more
Yeah.
common than you might think.
Yeah. So we're doing this deep dive into it's from these notes for a potential podcast called Healing Hearts: Navigating New Love After Trauma.
Okay. Yeah.
And specifically, this episode is about like how past trauma can really impact new relationships.
Right. Right. Because it's not always obvious, is it?
No, not at all. And it can be, kind of tricky to figure out. So that's what we're going to unpack
Well,
today.
let's unpack it.
Okay, so first things first, when we say trauma, I think a lot of people think like huge, massive life events.
All right. Like a really big capital T trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not always like that dramatic, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, those big events definitely count, but, it can also be things like difficult childhood experiences, maybe even emotional abuse, or even just like patterns from past relationships. Like all of that can kind of leave a mark.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like even if it's not trauma with a capital T, like
Yeah.
those heartbreaks can still like really sting, you know what I mean? And those can shape how we approach love too.
Totally. Heartbreak, even if it's not quote unquote trauma, can leave these like emotional
Oh,
scars.
for sure. Like I remember there was this one relationship and I thought I was like completely over it.
Yeah.
But then I realized I kept like choosing partners who had really similar traits to.
Oh, yeah.
It made me realize like, wow, this stuff really does affect us, even when we think we're over it.
It's like we're drawn to familiar patterns, even if they're not necessarily healthy ones.
Exactly. So is this where attachment style comes in? I've heard like secure, anxious, avoidant.
You got it. Attachment style is basically like this blueprint for how we connect with other people. And, it's shaped by our early relationships, like how our parents or caregivers interacted with us.
Okay, so like walk me through those different styles a bit.
Sure. So, someone with a secure attachment style, they tend to feel pretty comfortable with intimacy and closeness. They trust their partners and they feel secure in the relationship.
Got it.
Then you have the anxious attachment style. These folks, they really crave closeness, but they also worry a lot, about their partner leaving or maybe not loving them enough.
Okay, I see. So it's like this push and pull, right? They want closeness, but they're also afraid of it.
Exactly. And then there's the avoidant attachment style. They might be uncomfortable with too much closeness and have a really hard time, like, opening up emotionally.
Interesting. I wonder if, after betrayal in a past relationship, does that kind of make it harder to trust in new relationships?
Oh, absolutely. Betrayal, it's like it can shatter that foundation of trust. So, yeah, it definitely makes it harder to open up again.
Right. Because it's like a part of you is like trying to protect yourself from getting hurt again.
Totally, totally. And this is where like these patterns start to emerge in our new relationships. Have you ever heard of self-sabotage?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like when someone's in a relationship and it's
Yeah.
actually going really well, but they kind of like mess it up.
Yes, like unconsciously creating
It's
problems.
like they're almost afraid of things working out,
Hmm.
like scared of being happy.
Right, right. It can be rooted in, a fear of intimacy, maybe even this fear of like engulfment, losing yourself in the relationship.
Yeah. Oh, that's deep.
It is, and it can be tough to break free from those patterns.
And then there's that, I think it's called projection, right? Where we kind of put our past hurts on our current partners.
Oh, projection. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big one. It's where we take those past hurts, those insecurities, and we kind of like unconsciously place them onto our partner, even if they've done nothing wrong.
Can you give an example of like how that might play out in a relationship?
Yeah, for sure. Imagine someone who was, let's say, cheated on in a past relationship. They might start accusing their current partner of cheating, even if there's like zero evidence, because they're projecting that past hurt onto the new relationship.
Wow. So how do we address these patterns and, build those like healthy dynamics? Communication is key.
Communication is huge. Yeah. It's about creating that safe space where both partners can be vulnerable, share their stories, their fears, their past hurts, all of it.
But how do you like practically create that safe space? And it sounds great in theory, but like how do you actually have those conversations?
Right. It's all about active listening, showing empathy, and using I statements, to express your feelings and needs without blaming your partner.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like instead of saying, you always make me feel insecure, you could say, I feel insecure when you don't respond to my texts.
Yeah.
It's about owning your feelings.
Right, right. And it also helps to like set aside some time for these conversations, right? Like no distractions, just you two really focusing on each other.
Exactly. Make it intentional.
Okay, that's super helpful. So let's switch gears a bit and talk
Yeah.
about healing, like
Mhm.
processing and working through those past experiences. What are some steps we can take to move forward?
Well, therapy can be incredibly helpful, especially modalities like emotionally focused therapy.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It specifically addresses relationship patterns. It helps us understand our triggers and develop healthier coping mechanisms.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it's also about, self-awareness, recognizing our own patterns and actively choosing to respond differently. It's not just about talking about it, it's about doing things differently.
Right. So it's like we have the power to rewrite the script of our relationships, right?
Yeah.
We're not just stuck with those old patterns.
Exactly. You're not defined by your past. You can learn from it, heal from it, and create healthier, more fulfilling relationships moving forward.
Love that. So what can we do, like today, to start building those healthier relationships?
Boundaries, my friend. Boundaries. Clear boundaries are essential. I can't stress that enough. They're about protecting yourself and fostering mutual respect, knowing what you're comfortable with and communicating that clearly.
It's like understanding how our past affects us is really about empowering ourselves to make conscious choices in the present.
Yes, it's about recognizing that you have the power to create a different future for yourself and your relationships.
Okay, so much good stuff here. As we wrap up, is there one key thing you would encourage our listeners to focus on as they, navigate their own relationships?
Yeah. I'd say take a moment to reflect. Think about your past relationships. Can you spot any patterns that might be influenced by those previous experiences? Because once you see those patterns, you can start to shift them.
So awareness is like the first step to change.
Absolutely.
It's a journey, but it's so worth it. Thanks for really illuminating this path for us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
That was great.